What is a worldview? Somebody will say, well, I don't know. Let me tell you exactly what it is. It is a philosophy of life. It is how you and I look on life, all of life, animal life, Homo sapien, human life, and how we relate to the universe and to the earth. Basic definition of worldview. A Christian worldview begins in Genesis 1, 2, 3. And there are 4 cornerstones, got me, of a worldview. 4 cornerstones of how those who are in Christ see and view the world in which we now live in the 21st century. 4 cornerstones. This is the foundation, our worldview, these cornerstones upon which we have to stand before we can proceed to any other assumptions or decisions in life. If the foundation of being destroyed, what shall the righteous do? We've looked at that verse before. And I think all of us can agree as we look at these foundations that they're being destroyed. That is the central attack of Slewfoot, the evil one. Destroy the foundations. And we see around us all of those foundations upon which Western civilization, and of which all of us really have basically stood for most of our lives, they're being systematically destroyed. Here's the foundation. That's our Christian worldview. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 cornerstones in the foundation. The first cornerstone, Jesus tells us, he was asked in Matthew 22 by a lawyer, typical, isn't it? By a lawyer, what is the great commandments according to the law? And Jesus answered, you shall love the Lord thy God with all of your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. That is the first cornerstone. And then we look in the New Testament and we discover that if we love God with all of our heart, our soul, and our mind, with our emotions, with our conscience, with the total essence of who we are, and with all of our strength, that enables us to understand how God loved us in bringing his Son, Jesus Christ, into the world, who gives us abundant life now and a full life forever. So the first cornerstone is to love God and to love Jesus Christ, and this enables us to do the next thing, the next cornerstone. Remember what Jesus said? Love the Lord thy God with everything you got. That's the first commandment, the first cornerstone. The second cornerstone is to love your neighbor. Love other people. We're not able to love only as we have been loved. Some people have a tough time loving because they haven't understood the total love of God and they haven't been loved by others. So we do not have the total capacity to love. First cornerstone, love God, love Jesus Christ. Second cornerstone, we're able to do that, to love our neighbors and to love people because we have been given love through Christ and through the love of God. Second cornerstone. Third cornerstone is marriage. You love your wife, you love your husband. And we're taught about this in many places, but particularly in Ephesians chapter 5. Third cornerstone. Love God, love Jesus Christ. Love your neighbor, love other people. And finally, husbands, love your wife, and wives, love your husbands. Fourth cornerstone. Love your children, love your kids. Now, how do you do that? How do you love your children? How does that operate? So we're going to be talking about for the next several weeks about loving kids. And we're going to look at the Bible that tells us with clear instructions as to how to truly love our children. And so where do we start? I think we start with a most familiar verse we have about family and kids in all the Bible. Most of us are familiar with it. It's found in Proverbs. We all know it, but I'm going to read it in order to be accurate. How do we love our kids? We train up a child, a kid, in the way he should go. And when he is old, he will not depart from it. That's how we love our kids. We train not down, we train up our children. I want to put this into a grid. And by the way, it begins the first season of training. Ecclesiastes says there's a season for everything. And with our children, there are seasons. There is 0 to 3. In that season, I call it the season of being a servant. It's the servant season, because that's when the parents, especially particularly mother, 90% of it, looks after that little one in every way: health, food, care, sleep, nurture. That's when the child, follow me closely, is the center of everything, and the mother and the dad surrogate. The mother is a total servant of the child for the child to survive. Now, other animals, when they're born, by the way, they can survive, they can make it. Humans cannot. Maybe we have a longer period of time in order to be safe and secure than other animals, and we are not an animal in the general sense, but in the particular sense, made in the image of God. God planned evidently for it to take more time. It takes more time for mom to be in this servant role where, guess what? The child is the center of everything in the life of that mom. Health, safety, food, temperament, everything. Now, the mother here misunderstands what I'm saying. It's a time of being a servant. And then the second year, you begin to move into the wonderful experience of toilet training. You see, you begin to require something of the child. Then the child begins to eat, maybe get something on them. Maybe they begin the second year to try to put on their clothes, and we develop that. And all of this is involved of those first 2 years. Now, season number 2 goes from 3 to 13. 10 years. And now things totally change, parents. No longer are you the servant and the child is the center, but now mom and dad are the center. Stay with me. Some people do not make this transition, and the child becomes an idol. Mom and dad are the center, and the child begins to feel this. All of a sudden, they're required to eat at a certain time. I don't want to eat now. This is when we eat. They get up at a certain time. I don't want to get up. This is when we get up. We go to bed at a certain time. This is the second stage. The first stage, you're a servant. The second stage, you are a leader. And you teach that child obedience and submission. You are in control. Now, the modern world says, you've got to tell your children. No. You don't explain anything. Why? Just because I told you. That's that period from 3 to 13. If you try to go into something else, you're not ready. It's just because I told you so. Stop. Turn around. Don't do that. When God gave the 10 Commandments, did he ask the Israelites, well, let's talk about these. What about the one on adultery? Y'all all for that one? Or stealing? No, God said, this is it. So parents, 3 to 13, what you say, what you command, that is when you are authoritative. Well, you will be mean. No, that's a sign of love. We'll talk about discipline later on. It's a sign of love. You love that which you discipline, that which you require. And we'll see that developing in our study. So this is a time of leadership, a time which mom and dad takes the role of God in their life. I read about a Christian psychotherapist. He tells the example, a mother of a 16-year-old said, my 16-year-old doesn't respect me. Man, he comes home and he's on drugs and he's drunk and I get on to him and we fuss and we argue and he's just mean to me. He says he hates me. And he said, what am I to do about it? And the Christian psychotherapist said, well, what you have to do is squeeze them back until they are 12 months old. Parents, get that. 3, 13, unquestioned obedience. Well, you're being hard. I want my children to love. Listen, your child doesn't need a buddy-buddy mother or a buddy-buddy daddy. They need a dad and a mom who teaches them obedience in 3 to 13. This is God's plan. We'll develop on discipline. We'll talk about this later, but indicates you really love. So this is a time in which you spell it out, you explain it, and say, this is how we do things in our house, in our family. And you do it because you love them. I went to a play in a secular school this week, and they had kids were there, and as I was leaving, I went out the door, and a whole bunch were hurrying at me, so I just held the door and let them go flying through, bang, bang, bang. And toward the end, there's a young man said, thank you, sir. Hello! What kind of parents you think he had? Did they teach respect? Did they teach manners? Did they teach appreciation? This is when you do it primarily between 3 and 13, those 10 years, in which mom and dad are now the center and the child is not a center, and the child doesn't like it. Man, it'd be good to have a servant all your life, wouldn't you? And some parents keep on serving. We'll talk about that style of parenting as we move through this time. Stage 2, authority, leadership by the parents. Stage 3. This is from 13 to 18, and this is when you give reasons, folks. This is when you explain what you're doing. Now you reason with them. 3 to 13, don't do any explanation. You don't need any explanation. You don't ask any explanation. Explanation won't do any good. They're beyond that point of reasoning. They just, this is it, and this is that. You see, if we do these things in these stages, stage 1, stage 2, we're ready for stage 3. They're growing up. They make decisions of their own primarily. You're still there. The Jews have a wonderful thing, a bar mitzvah, which they graduate, they become adults, they learn scripture. And almost every culture has it. The Japanese have a culture, which you get to be 20 years of old, you dress up in a suit, you go to business, go down to business with your dad, there's a celebration. That's when you can begin to vote. That's when they say you move into adulthood. An ancient tribe that lives today on the Amazon River, they had a way of letting their child grow up. When they got to be about 13 years of age, they had them put on gloves, and in that gloves were bullet ants. And a bite from a bullet ant, they say, is about 30 times worse than a bee sting. They have to put on those gloves and keep them on for 10 minutes and do it 20 times. And the thesis is they're teaching their kids as they grow into adulthood. There'll be pain and there'll be suffering, there'll be heartaches, and you have to learn how to do that if you're going to be a man or you're going to be a woman. You see, that was their way of transition. But the Cherokees had a wonderful way. When a young brave would come a certain age, they would take that brave out in the middle of the forest. They would say they would blindfold him, and he would have to sit there on a stump for no reason, taking the blindfold off, rain, snow, sleet, cold, wind. Never take the blindfold off as the sun went down until the sun came up the next morning. And you can imagine a 13-year-old young man out there in the forest surrounded by bears and lions and you know what in that day, and snakes, the fear that had come with that blindfold all night long. And the child was instructed never to tell anybody what happens as you go through this transition into manhood. And they sit there all night long with all the animals, all the possibilities coming down. When the sun comes up, then they can take off their blindfold. And when the young Cherokee takes off the blindfold, he looks, though he did not know it, there was his father sitting on a stump about 10 feet away. See, that's it, parents. Do you get the picture? And so this is when you begin to give them independence. You begin them a way to make their own decisions. You've built the right stuff in their life. You've gone through season 1. And now you've gone through season 2 when you were the commander-in-chief, the role of God in their life, and they obeyed without question, without pouting. You didn't negotiate. I'll give you this if you'll do that. Parents, don't do that. That's stupid. You're losing the battle of being a godly parent. So let's not cover all of it. This is a general introduction to our whole study of parenting. But let's see, the third thing I want to look at is, what is the goal of parenting? What is the goal? By the way, it's helping them find out God's purpose for their life. And this is the goal that parents have that'll lead him into that. Let me say something just to the side. You know what being unsuccessful, somebody who's unsuccessful is somebody who was a success and it didn't have any meaning. Did you get that? Unsuccessful person is somebody who was a success, but their success has no lasting meaning or significance. That's somebody who is unsuccessful. Success without meaning. Parents, we have an obligation to say to our children, God has a purpose for your life, has a plan for your life, an agenda for your life. And you will find it when we point them toward the goal. What is the bullseye that parents have? Let me say, by the way, I'm not including everything. Let me say, by the way, sometimes parents can do everything that's possible and do it all right, and still a child will go astray. Some will come back, some will not. And we use this verse, by the way, inappropriately. Train up a child the way he should go, and when he is old, he'll not depart from it. Well, my child, I tried to train him, but now he's out there. He is drinking, and he's had 16 marriages, but he's going to come back home. Listen, that verse is not a promise, it's a principle. Get the difference? Train up a child the way you go, and when they're old, they not depart from it. That's not a promise, that is a principle. Was God a good father? Adam and Eve? What happened to them? Because they had the freedom of choice, they made a decision that affected them and affect all of humanity. So we have to realize there's a way to parent. It's not the way of Cain. Read the Old Testament. Look what happened to all his descendants. Killed his brother. Look at the other child, Seth. Look at all his descendants. They followed in God's way. Cain followed in his way. Look at what happened in the results. Doesn't take somebody Phi Beta Kappa to figure that out. So what is God's method of parenting? I'll be quick. Number one, the goal is to let them imitate Jesus, to be like Jesus. Well, that is so high up there. It is. Romans 8:28. All things work together for good to those who love the Lord, those who are the called according to his purpose. Doesn't that sound great? I love that verse. Whatever's happening, all things going to work out for God's glory and for God's good. I love that verse. That's Romans 8:28, but Romans 8:29 said, your children are to conform to the Lord Jesus Christ. Oh, hello. All things work together for good, and then your children are to conform. In other words, they are to follow Jesus Christ, and we are to build in their lives godly principles, morals and manners, a love and a respect and a reverence for God. Deuteronomy 6, the Shema. That's what a Jewish father did every day with their children, every night with their children. What does it say? He said, hear ye, O Israel, there is one Lord, one God, and you are to build these godly principles in their life when they go to bed, remember? When they get up in the morning, when they eat their meals, when they go out the door. Well, that sounds awful hard and super pious. No, it's just the atmosphere of a Christian home. I came up in a Christian home because of my mom. My mother saw to it that we prayed when we sat down and ate a meal. We had a blessing. 3 meals we prayed. Every night before we went to bed, didn't matter when I came in, my mom would be there with the Bible. You missed. With the Bible. And she would read it, and I would read it, and we would pray for missionaries and for people. I did that every night of my life when I was old, when I was born, all the way until the last night I spent with my mom before she went to heaven. We did that in our home, and I would come in every day. I never rode to school in my life. I walked from the first grade all the way through high school. We walked there, up and coming. When I would come home, I'd hear my mother singing thousands of times the same chorus. In the morning I see his face. In the evening his form I trace. In the darkness his voice I know. I see Jesus everywhere I go. She didn't just pour it into us. It was the atmosphere of our home. The atmosphere. It wasn't a super pious kind of thing. It was the atmosphere. Therefore, we're teaching our children to follow Jesus, to let him be their example. That's the first goal. You know what the second goal is? Is for the parent, particularly the father, to be a serious follower of Jesus. Some of you dads will say, boy, I'd do anything for my children that I could. The best thing you can do is to be a genuine man of God. That's the best thing you can do for your child, nothing else. All these kinds of parenting, helicopter possessive parenting, you want to keep your child from having any pain or challenges or any shortcomings or fail. No. That's a part of the 3 to 13 growing up so they'll be able to be a man or woman when they get in their teens and they'll make right choices themselves. That's our goal. That's our goal. Nothing we need more than for mom and dad to say what Paul said in 1 Corinthians. He said, oh, you children, you're my children. He said, I want you to imitate me. Can you say that, Dad? Can you say that? Children will do what we require them to do until they're about 14. Then they begin to do and live like we live. I'll do anything for my kids. Be a godly man. Be a godly woman. Love your wife. Love your husband. The highest priority. So much to say. We've only just begun. We've laid down the principles. You got them? The foundation is being destroyed. We see the role of parents, strategic role of parents, as to how to parent, how to bring up a child God's way. First 2 years, remember? You're a servant to the child. Next 10 years, 13 to 13, you are a leader. You become the authority figure of your child. Without a lot of explanation, you don't do that. Then 13 up, you see your child begin to grow and develop and make choices on their own by and large. But you're still sitting there on the stump when they go through it all. Do you get that? Train up a child in the way, not many ways, God's way they should go. And when they're old, when they're older, when they mature, the GPS system will be built in their heart and their life, and they'll make the right choices.